lot of people are going, oh my gosh, I didn't see any deer. Where'd all the deer go? What can we do to see more deer next year?
Most people today aren't even aware of the history of fire on the landscape.
I know fire's probably really scary, especially what's happening out in California. Prescribed fire, wildfire, they kind of putting them in the same category. We don't have, those crown fires where they're jumping across tree to tree. We just aren't going to get those type fires.
Everywhere you go and you drive through the Ozarks, it looks like a crowded timber stand. It's really hard to imagine a world where it didn't always look like that.
We've grown up seeing mismanaged timber and mismanaged habitat, and we think it's normal. Really diverse habitat is extremely productive for wildlife, and it's beautiful.
In the Ozarks, people have always lived in rhythm with the natural world. Hunting, fishing, living off the land aren't just things we like to do, it's who we are. And though our lives are inextricably linked to the land we live on, today we've never been more disconnected from it. So join us as we travel across the region, bringing you the voices of the Ozarks, deepen our connection to the land, sharpen our skills in the outdoors, and learn what it means to be an Ozarker. Welcome back to the Ozark Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle V, and I am joined as always by co-host of the show and my good buddy, Kyle Plunkett. How are you?
Yes, sir. We're a little north of Branson. Feeling good.
Yeah.
Hanging out with Mr. Daniel Mallette of Growing Deer TV.
That's right. This is your second time on the show.
Second time. You had me back.
That's right. We liked you so much. We couldn't stay away. We had you, I'm trying to think, we had you on last fall and we were talking about, it was in August, I think. We were talking about preseason or getting right up into the edge of season. Mm-hmm. What can you do, kind of last minute scramble and try to make your property a little bit better?
And acorns. I think acorns were a big topic.
That's right.
And I think that played into deer season a lot.
You prophesied it being a heavy acorn year.
You did. You were on it.
You were right.
Well, we were out with those binoculars looking for acorns, and it paid off. I actually tagged a buck early season, like into September 24th, just a few days after our opener, and I was hunting acorns. And so it really paid off.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did, because as more and more acorns hit the ground, it would have gotten to be probably a longer season.
Oh, yeah. It got tough. I mean, just talking to people in the community and people who hunt, it was like people were searching. They were not having a whole lot of luck, but it's crazy how big of a difference that can make. I mean, we even saw it early with bear season. It was, we had bears coming in daily, and 5, 6, 7 different bears. And by the time we got to opening day, just completely gone. And there's food there, but they had so many options that they weren't coming into this spot.
And you
anymore.
compare that to the previous year. I think the quota was met in like 5-6 days or something like that.
By the next Tuesday or something like that.
And then this year was...
We still hadn't hit.
I don't think it was met.
Season,
I don't think it ever got hit.
No, it didn't. It is wild how big of a difference the acorns can make on your season and how many deer get harvested.
Yeah.
But you're right. That was what we were talking about. And so now, having kind of talked about how do you scramble together and put together, a little bit better plan coming right into the season, if you hadn't done much, or maybe you've done whole lot, like what could you do right before season? Now we wanted to come back and talk about, hey, deer season's pretty much over. In Missouri, it's over. In Arkansas, I can't believe it still goes to the end of February. People could still be hunting. I don't think many people are at this point.
It's over.
But at this point, you've got a lot more time to put into your own property, and you can really make a difference. And so I wanted to just kind of ask you, just from the get-go, why does winter off-season land management matter?
Well, it's a stress period for deer. I mean, really, when you're looking at your long-term objectives, it's a stressful period. So especially coming off this year, a lot of people are going, oh my gosh, I didn't see any deer. Where'd all the deer go? They're kind of freaking out to some extent, right?
Yeah.
And so they're trying to think, what can we do to see more deer next year or have healthy deer? And so this time of year, that's in the back of everyone's mind. And so they start thinking, all right, what management practices can I do right now to improve deer season next year? So that's that's kind of what everyone's thinking about.
Right.
When you go out there, one of the biggest things right off the bat you can do is we'll start scouting, taking inventory of what's going on. Did we have a heavy acorn year like we did this year, where there was a lot of food throughout the season? Look at those trail cameras. Are deer, still full? Are they rounded out because they've got some calories? Are they skinny? Maybe there weren't as many acorns in some pockets of the Ozarks, and deer are needing groceries. And so in the back of your mind, you're going, all right, I need more winter groceries in the next few years to help those deer get through these tough seasons.
Yeah. So you're walking out and you're looking around to see, what do I still have as an option for food?
Exactly. The biggest thing a lot of guys could do right now, the first thing I would do is take an inventory of what's going on in the deer herd. How much food and habitat you have, and what's the quality, the health of the deer that you have. Are they shedding early? If they're dropping early, they can have stress.
Yeah.
Healthier deer are going to hold their antlers on average longer. And so if they're already dropped, and there's guys down in Arkansas, they're seeing those big old pedicles and they've already dropped, they go, man, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't have antlers. Well, there's not a lot of groceries maybe, and that deer's stressed, or it was injured during the rut or something like that. But that's one thing I'm really looking for. And also looking at does. Did we harvest enough does for the habitat? And might have to make some notes for next year. May need to buy a few more arrows, get a few more bullets, and harvest some does. If you can't necessarily improve the habitat, one thing you can do is remove the mouths so you have a bit more habitat going on.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. I remember you talking about, I think I saw a video that y'all posted the other day on bucks holding on to antlers for a shorter amount of time, longer amount of time, and like you just said, correlating that to health. What, in the Ozarks, what do you normally expect to see? Like, how long does in a typical, I guess, average year, would you expect to see a buck hold on to his antlers? And if you're seeing it before that, you're like, maybe I don't have the healthiest herd.
It's based off photo period.
Okay.
And photo periods, the daylight hours during the day. So we see that same thing in the summer, right? Days start getting shorter. That triggers that testosterone start rising, and bucks shed their velvet because they're getting that testosterone's rising. They're amping up, getting ready for the upcoming rut. And on the backside of that testosterone starts dropping as that photo period changes, and that testosterone level drops. They shed in their antlers because they don't need that testosterone for reproduction. They're going into survival mode, kind of going into winter, kind of recovering from the rut. So if you have healthy habitat, your doe fawns could become receptive when they get about 65, 70 pounds. So if you have really good habitat, that could happen, in our area, that those doe fawns could reach puberty and become receptive late December into January. And that's going to keep that testosterone level up, right? So that's kind of a way to look at your deer herd and say, all right, we've got some healthy deer. We're seeing doe fawns that are becoming receptive. We're gaining some ground here.
And would you notice that by bucks starting to move back into like rutting activity where they're pushing around doe fawns?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you'll probably start seeing they may be kind of grouped up, if you will, because there's not going to be a ton of doe fawns out there. So if there's a doe fawn that's receptive, there's probably going to be several bucks around that doe fawn. Just like in October where those first few receptive does become receptive, even though they're adults, there's going to be a lot of bucks there close by.
They get really popular quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably not near as aggressive, though.
That's what, when Rustin was talking about late season, some of his favorite hunts, he's talking about a good food source he's found, a good cover, and there's a bunch of does around with some young ones, some doe fawns. And he's had bucks come in late December into early January, aggressive, grunting, chasing, all that. And it's, in his mind, he's just thinking like a deer hunter. It's like, wow, they're still receptive does. What you're saying is it's probably, yes, they are, but it's probably some young receptive does. And they're grouped back up and they're surviving together. And, a mature buck is still running around going, I know somebody in here is good to go.
And the great thing about a receptive doe fawn is that's the first dance. She doesn't know what's going on. So she's coming out to a food source every day on this pattern. She starts feeling something funky going on. She's out there in the wide open, and that's bringing a buck that has been pretty elusive all season, right? He's got to go out in that open field to be with that receptive doe. Now, an adult doe, if she's cycling back through, wasn't bred the first time she's cycling back through, well, she's going to cover.
Yeah.
Because she knows what's up.
Yeah.
She get 2 or 3 spikes walk out and they start pushing around. She's going. But that doe fawn, they just don't know what's going on.
Interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. So back to dropping antlers, you said testosterone will have them hold on to the antlers longer. It can. Around here, what do you guys typically observe when antlers start to drop that you're like, I think we can safely assume that you guys have a pretty healthy deer herd up here.
Yeah.
So when are you seeing antlers drop?
Yeah, again, it's not a calendar date.
Okay.
So if we had, a wicked winter, like if we had that Arctic blast and it's been lasting for, 4 weeks, yeah, deer are going to be stressed. And that stress could cause them to drop earlier.
Okay.
If we're having this mild winter and we still have good groceries, they could hold a bit longer.
Like this year has been a pretty mild.
It's a window of time.
I see.
Yeah. And within that window of time, then it kind of comes into what's that specific deer's health.
Gotcha.
Is that deer
So
stressed?
it really depends.
Yeah. But I mean,
have you seen some dropping so far yet this year?
At our place, I've only seen like one small deer that looked like he had dropped. I couldn't tell if it was broken or dropped, but yeah, most of our bucks are still holding antlers.
Yeah.
Which is a great indicator.
Yeah, absolutely.
For us.
Yeah.
All the ones I have on camera are still holding.
Same.
As of February 6th.
6 when we're
But
recording.
I've got buddies in Illinois and some in Iowa, and they've had bucks that shed, late December this year. But they had a lot of snow, really cold temperatures.
Yeah.
It was pretty stressful up there this year.
Yeah.
Back to the health of the doe herd. If you're looking at your camera and you're seeing a bunch of doe in front of it, what are you looking for that are some good key indicators of health?
Yeah, I'm looking especially around that rump. Can you see her hip bones? Or is that really round? And it can be kind of deceiving this time of year because you get one picture and at night and it's 20 degrees and they're all fluffed out and they look really big and healthy.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
like, oh yeah, woo, she's big, right? But then during the day she's back down and you can kind of see her ribs or something like that. So I'm looking at ribs and really looking at that rump though.
Okay. That's good to know. Just good how to assess your herd. Just
Yeah.
good tips.
Yeah, that is a good tip. So on the land management thing, we're talking about winter land management. We're going to get into some trapping. We're going to get into some prescribed fire burning, stuff that you guys, I know, specialize in.
Yeah.
And that's why we came up to talk to you because you guys are the pros on this. But before we go into trapping, I want to talk about just in general, what are some of the challenges that you guys face with applying some of the more common winter land management tactics, specifically within the Ozarks? I mean, I'm thinking terrain, weather, some of the things that you're just going to run into of like, it's kind of sometimes can be tough, but here's when you might want to get out there and do this.
Yeah. The weather's a big one. It's, like this year, we have over 150 acres, give or take, of cedars that we have felled, and we need to burn them this year. And we were thinking, we're about there, we're going to burn. And then we looked at the weather forecast, and there was 2 inches of rain coming. And we just weren't able to burn before that rain. And because we have these cooler days now, and they're kind of cloudy and short days, we're just not going to be able to dry out real quick. And so we're probably going to be sitting for a while. But when it comes, we got to be ready. So one thing that we're doing, back to your question of what can we do right now, we're prepping fire line.
Okay.
So when the conditions, we can drop a match and it will burn, we're going, we're ready. So we're prepping for sure.
What are you doing to prep a fire line? I mean, I know based on watching some of your videos and other things, I know you have to create these fire breaks and things like that. Are you already starting to clear stuff? I know you've cut. When did you cut this stuff down? I guess.
Yeah, I think this was about a year and a half ago.
Okay, so the cutting, everything that's down would be ready to burn. Once we get to a dry spell.
And we slashed it up so it dried really well.
Okay.
It's not like a full tree that's just cut and let lay. We actually slash it up so it gets really close to the ground so we can get really good consumption.
Okay.
And it also lowers the intensity of the fire. We don't have these big, 40-foot fires coming off these, huge cedar trees,
yeah.
right? So that's really helped too.
Okay. And then the prepping the fire lines and things like that.
Yeah, we're just taking a backpack blower and we're just we step right inside from the cedars. We step right inside those leaves and we just blow leaves out, 4 or 5 feet wide, and just a bare patch there in the woods. That bare soil has no fuel across there. Fire's never satisfied. So as soon as it hits that, bare soil, it can't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so we're making those. And then what we're also doing is, since we've got time, we're going through and we're felling, big snags that may be close to the fire line, like a big dead ash tree. We've got some ash that have died over the years, and they're kind of right by the line. And we don't want that fire to catch up that snag and be 20 feet up in the air and then dropping embers. So we're going ahead and we're felling them, getting closer to the ground so we don't have that. So just trying to think through it all and be ready so we don't have a long day when it comes to light a fire.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'll just be ready to go when it's time. Yeah, that makes sense, especially if you've got really tight windows where, a rain is coming and you've been waiting and it's like, it's go time. We got to get everything out of the way so that we can just hop on it.
Yeah. And it takes several days on some of these larger units. It takes several days to create a good line.
Mm-hmm. With just kind of our habitat in general, educate me a little bit on the terrain aspects and the habitat that we have of how often do you have days and times that you can burn? Is it pretty rare? Is your window over the course of 2-3 months?
Yeah.
Kind of talk me through what we see around the Ozarks.
Yeah. So again, it varies with the weather,
Sure.
But like a lot of these areas that were taken over by eastern red cedars, they used to be called they're called glades, right? And they used to historically would have fire there. It would rip up. A lot of these are on south facing slopes where there's more sunlight. It's drier. It's warmer. That humidity is lower. And fire would rip up these areas, and they'd be these, beautiful glade areas that you see in photos or on video, right, of wildflowers and grasses and, bluffs here and there, just the stunning type stuff.
Yeah.
Well, when fire was removed from the landscape, the eastern red cedar encroached and just kind of took that over. So when you drive through the Ozarks, a lot of times you'll see these south-facing slopes just chock full of cedars. Well, we can fell those, and we're getting sunlight to the ground, and we want to restore that native habitat the way it used to be. And fire's a natural tool, and so it was on the landscape. We're just bringing it back and getting habitat back to where it used to be. And so those south-facing slopes are areas where we can easily reclaim a lot of habitat because the conditions are very favorable for fire. Mm-hmm. More sunlight, dry, that lower humidity, right? So when we're kind of looking at our fire season, we're prepping those south-facing slopes probably first because we know if we are a little wet, they're going to be the ones that dry out first.
Yeah.
When you're, you said you're, cutting up 150 acres of cedar. How long does that take you? Are you talking a couple guys with a chainsaw?
We brought in a crew.
How big's a crew?
And they do, I think this group had like 10, 12 guys, something like that. And they went through it quick.
Really?
They're workers. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And I want to say, they were kind of here and then they came back and did another piece here and there, but probably all together, just a couple weeks.
Okay. So some work though.
Yeah.
10, 12 guys, a couple weeks to get, that's a lot of acreage. I wasn't sure how long that'd take.
And they're basically clear cutting any cedar they're getting rid of. And then they're selectively leaving. What are you
hardwoods.
Guys? You asked them to leave?
We're not cutting the hardwoods.
Okay.
But a lot of these areas, again, fire was in there. There weren't many hardwoods in there to start with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe we just start with prescribed burning. I said trapping, but I think let's save trapping for a little bit because I want to dive into the prescribed burning a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I've not done it, but we've talked with so many people now who have done it, or they're a burn boss, or they just believe in the theory of it.
Yeah.
Itself. So for a guy who's wanting to maybe think about burning his property, and so take me for example. I'm a guy. I've got friends who can maybe help me out, so I can get a few saws out there. What would be a manageable size to start with, where you're like, this would be a good beginner kind of prescribed fire burn?
Yeah. First thing I would do is I'd encourage you or someone that's starting fire, probably take a fire course.
Yeah.
Learn just the book, knowledge of fire behavior, the things you're looking for. There's going to be a lot of numbers and a lot of technical stuff that probably you'll totally forget once you're in the field applying, dropping fire. But it's really good to understand that overarching principle of how fire behaves and what you're looking for, preparing for fire, creating a fire plan, little things that you may not even think about.
Yeah.
Right.
To that point, to anyone listening, there is a course, Arkansas Game and Fish did one with Quail Forever, and it's on YouTube. And so I went through the first part of it, and I ended up not getting through it all just because I wasn't seriously considering burning anything at that time. But it is fascinating. The first couple of episodes, everything that they go through, talking about the historical burn regimes around our area. And so if you guys are listening and you're curious about where's one of those, YouTube actually has some of these courses.
Yeah. Most states have a really good fire course that you can take. And then join someone on a fire. Just sit in their pocket and just watch. And someone that knows what they're doing. And that's where I would start. And then you're like, all right, I think we can do that. Let's get some buddies together. And I'd start small. I mean, it may be 2 or 3 acres. And maybe you have a bigger area that you want to burn.
Right. But
you could lay out that, maybe 2 or 3 acres in an area, burn it, and that becomes a fire break or a big black area for your next fire. So now you've got a really good buffer, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you have an interior road and you want to burn in 2 acres or whatnot, and then there's a big, 10-acre area that you want to burn down the road. Well, you burn 2 acres between the road and that unit. Now you got a lot of black as your buffer. So yeah, you can start small and then get in there. The number of acres per day depends on kind of your expertise, the terrain, the fuel load,
the wind,
the conditions. Yeah. And your mission. If you're just trying to creep a fire, really low intensity, want really good consumption, or you want to protect trees, that's a really slow, long fire. You're probably not biting off as many acres that day. If you're, really going after some habitat and we're got big blocks of, big glades, like we'll burn some acres that are 50 acres large this spring.
At one time.
Yeah, at one time. And they'll be long fires.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. They'll be long fires.
They go
but
all
they'll
day?
be bigger chunks. Oh, yeah, into the night, too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So y'all just, on days like that, this is all we're doing today, and we may have to be out here late.
Yeah. You go until the fire's out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you always want to follow up the next day, clean up. That's part of a fire, too. It's overlooked quite a bit. Folks think, okay, we're done with the fire, it's out, and they go home and they go out of town for the weekend, and then they get a call, hey, your fire got out,
Their
right?
neighbor calls them.
So, yeah, you always want to go back because, again, those snags catch, wind picks up. Sometimes you are burning because the conditions are pretty good, and then the next few days, they get, really good, could be kind of dangerous, right?
Yeah.
High winds, low humidity. So if you have that coming in after a fire, you've got to be really careful. And because those trees, those big snags, they could go for, days or weeks.
How do you clean up? You're saying clean up. I mean, you're going with just a rake or a shovel and flipping stuff
or
over.
chainsaw. If some snag did catch on fire, we're going to cut it down, get it on the ground so it's not
it's not high,
blown up.
That makes sense.
If you've got little logs, smoldering right by the line, we got leather gloves on. We're picking them up and we're chucking them, 50 yards inside the black, so there's more black between it and the line. Just little things like that.
So it's really it's a 2-day thing that you're committing the full day to burning, and then at least a portion of the next day to go back and check and make sure that everything's out.
And your time prepping the line.
Yeah.
we always say you should put more work into prepping your line than on the fire, right? Because the day of the fire should be really boring. You don't want to have a real exciting day on the fire, right?
Yeah.
So you do all the work, firework, on your fire line.
But all your good stories come from really exciting days on the fire. Like the time I almost burned my house down. I don't know if I've told that on here, and I probably won't.
I feel like everyone's probably got a fire story where something almost got away from them or maybe did.
My half-acre backyard has never looked better than the spring after I burned my whole yard up.
Dude, that feeling is the worst when it's just
gosh.
you're watching it just climb away from you, and you're like, oh boy,
I'd never
we're
called
gonna
the-
be in deep doo-doo.
I'd never called the fire department until that day.
Yeah,
First time I called the fire department, so I almost burned my house
and you were
down.
glad they showed up.
Very.
that is
And I
right.
called them instantly. It was one of those, it was a perfect day, and then the conditions changed.
Yeah.
And so fire that was manageable in the fire pit was all of a sudden all over everything.
and not very manageable.
Yeah, not very manageable.
Yeah,
No, that makes sense. So good prepped lines. You want the burn to be boring. If its conditions are really optimal, you can maybe get away with 50 acres in a day, but most likely you're looking at under.
You could do more. It depends on the fuel load, the terrain, how many guys you have helping, expertise levels. A couple of years ago, Grant, myself, and another guy did, if I remember, right at 300 acres
Okay.
in the mountains.
That's
a lot.
We were going,
Yeah.
but it went well.
How many guys would you have helping you burn 300 acres?
It was just 3 of us.
3 of y'all.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you driving the fire lines to make sure stuff's not jumping? And I mean,
There weren't any roads.
You're just
We
walking it.
we were walking it. We were hoofing it.
Yeah.
that's fun.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it is.
But it was a long day.
Yeah.
But because we were constantly bouncing back and forth. Always checking our back line, making sure we didn't have any spots. We started early when the humidity was lower, and so it wasn't quite as intense. And we strung out quite a bit of line, and that humidity was lower, so that fire was real low. And we got a good black line, 30, 40 yards. And then as this humidity started dropping, that fire started picking up. But we had that really good buffer in place, and then we could start moving a little faster. And we felt comfortable going. So
How do you depend on the wind on something like that? Because I mean, wind in the mountains can swirl and change. And go, I mean, upside down and backwards.
Yeah.
It feels
Oh,
like.
yeah.
I mean,
You learn a lot about the thermals and why you never see deer in the Ozarks on a fire, because the smoke's always doing this, right? The weatherman says we got a south fire, and it's hitting you straight in the face, from the north. Come around the point, but yeah, you kind of learn, down low, it can get swirly. Just like hunting, why you don't probably hunt down in a right where these drainages meet, because the wind's swirling and thermals are going. The smoke's going to do the same thing, and so you kind of stay away from those areas. Try to let it back down in there, because it can start getting swirly and jump around. So yeah, you use that knowledge of what the wind's doing from hunting to try to really manage your fire and try to think ahead of what is that going to do down there.
Yeah. Before we go any further on this, it's been a while since we've done a true burn episode with a guest who's talking about the benefits of it. For someone who's hearing this and they're like, that's interesting. Why would you want to burn in the first place? You mentioned glades and fire used to be on the landscape, but what is the desired condition that you're hoping to get to by introducing these fires?
Yeah. Well, for these cedars, this first fire is going to reduce our fuel load. So we're not going to have
got all
heavy
those cedars
fuel
down
load,
on the
right?
ground. Yep.
So that's kind of the mission or goal of this first fire. I know fire's probably really scary, especially coming after what's happening out in California. I mean, everyone's going, gosh, prescribed fire, wildfire. They kind of changing those, putting them into the same category.
Right.
Our humidity here rarely gets into the teens. We don't have, those top crown fires where they're jumping across tree to tree. The conditions here and throughout much of the whitetails range, southeast, our humidity is such, we just aren't going to get those type fires. Right. Yeah, they get out of it sometimes. We have a hot spot get out behind us, and it might burn an acre before we get it out in the timber or something like that. But yeah, your goal with prescribed fire, it's never controlled, right? We can't control fire. Like I just said, they can get out.
Yeah.
It's not controlled.
Prescribed burning, not controlled
fire.
burning. Yeah, that makes sense.
And that prescription is, what's our mission? Are we reducing fuel? Are we trying to improve the habitat, which is how we use fire a lot of times here, is we want to, it's that natural tool that a lot of species respond to fire because it's been on the landscape since the beginning, right? Lightning strikes, fire, boom. Native Americans lit fire, to get green growth for hunting, used it to control, manipulate how critters moved through the landscape too. I mean, it was a tool. And so we use that during different times of the year to get to a specific mission. During the dormant season, right now, a lot of late winter, a lot of species, grass species have made seed and they're holding their seed, right? So if you see native grass right now, it's still kind of, you probably see their seed, it's kind of fuzzy up top. Well, if we burn that seed drops and it sits right there on the ground. It's the perfect seed bed for that seed to germinate and grow. So right now favors grasses and forbs, wildflowers, broadleafs, which is great deer food and great turkey poult habitat, which I think we're probably going to talk about later.
Yeah, we will.
But if we burn during the growing season, those species, they have flowered, they've made seed. And so if we burn during the summer, those seeds lay on the ground and have a great seed bed. So you favor more of those species. So we like to rotate between dormant season and growing season fire so we can get grasses and forbs. We don't want just straight grass. That's not great habitat. It's great cover for deer, but there's no food there.
Yeah.
Right? And historically, that native habitat wasn't straight grass because not every fire was during the winter.
Right.
Right? There were summer fires. And so we want to try to break that fire rotation up a little bit to get more diversity. And really diverse habitat is extremely productive for wildlife. And it's beautiful. I think all those wildflowers you see, pollinators. I mean, you walk through some of these native habitat areas in the summer and you can't hear yourself think because there's so many bees buzzing around, butterflies are hitting you in the face. It's stunning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for cover, you burn in the winter. For food, you burn in the summer.
Yeah.
For the next.
For
the most
deer.
part, for deer. Well, for deer or turkeys.
Forbs are great umbrella cover for turkey poults.
Yeah.
Think ragweed. The great thing about those umbrella species is they kind of go across the ground like that, and you've burned and it's bare underneath. Those young turkey poults can run underneath and they can bug. It holds more moisture. It's higher humidity, so it's really good habitat for insects, which is that protein diet for poults. So they can run under there from, hawks, owls. They're covered. That's their cover.
Right.
And then it's also this great environment for their food.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And then also you got a pile of deer food.
Oh yeah, and the diversity of it too, because deer they're very aware of what they need, right? When they're selecting their food, they're going to go from high protein to high calorie to fats, and they're going to look around for the different things that their body's saying they need.
Yes, and they got to eat a lot every day. A deer has to consume somewhere between 5 to 7% of its body weight every day, and that's dry weight, right? 70%, give or take, of a plant is moisture. So a deer's got to eat, 15 pounds, give or take, every day for a 100-pound doe.
Yeah.
Think about a 200-pound buck.
Yeah.
He's got to eat a lot of food every day.
Oh yeah, he's chowing. He's at the buffet.
So when we're talking about habitat and what can you do right now, like, do they have those groceries? Remember, they got to eat a lot. Do they have that food? And what's great about the Ozarks is, a lot of areas are these slopes. You can't put a food plot in, right? It's tough to get a tractor there.
Yeah, it's rocky.
Or you can't hunt it because of the thermals. You just can't get within range of a deer. But you can create really good habitat in those areas and maximize those acres. They're not just acorn trees. You know, there's not just oaks there now. Now you got really good habitat. You can do a nice little chunk of acreage that you thought was kind of a wasteland or useless.
Yeah.
Or just big open timber.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you've made it more than just that.
Oh, yeah.
Only productive
And
in the fall.
not only really productive and great habitat, but you've influenced your hunting because now you have a hard edge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And deer are edge critters. And so you can really manipulate the habitat, not only for providing great cover and groceries for deer, but for hunting.
Right.
And create some bottlenecks that weren't as obvious or weren't there before you started manipulating the habitat.
Yeah, because in that example, say it was a spot that you may not hunt because it's down in a bottom and the wind's going to be swirling. You could always back off of that and put yourself in a more favorable condition where the wind's going to be a little bit more predictable.
Yeah.
And they don't have the sight line on you that they might have down in the bottom or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And during certain conditions where deer are bedded, and you can it's easier to pattern deer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. It's always a good reminder to hear like why we burn and how to burn, and why you should consider it if you haven't done it before. Because it's like you said, I feel like there's so many people that associate fire with it's a scary thing, it's a dangerous thing, and it's just been so long that we've had fire in the landscape. Most people today aren't even aware of the history of fire on the landscape. And so I remember the first time we were hearing it, it was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What did the Ozarks used to look like? And why has it changed? And why it hasn't always looked like this? It's hard to see this. And everywhere you go and you drive through the Ozarks, it looks like a just crowded timber stand.
Yes.
And it's really hard to imagine a world where it didn't always look like that. And so it's always good to revisit that because it's just so foreign at this point.
Yeah. We've grown up seeing mismanaged timber and mismanaged habitat, and we think it's normal. But it's very mismanaged on a lot of levels.
Yeah. So back to fire, we're talking about conditions. We're talking about how you can do this. I'm curious with the terrain we have, and I'm thinking of fire and how it climbs and it goes with the wind and things like that. How do you guys play to your advantage of, if I'm burning uphill versus burning downhill, what's the wind doing? What am I looking for? Do I want it to be really hot? Do I want it to be kind of a cold fire? Talk me through some of that stuff. I know I threw a lot at you there.
No. Yeah. For the most part, a lot of times when we're making habitat, we're still going to leave those really good, high quality oaks, white oaks. White oaks have a really thin bark, so you can't get a real intense fire by them, or you'll damage that tree or could kill that tree. So a lot of these times we want to protect those good trees, right? Unless it's pines. Pines are fairly fire resistant. Post oaks, we have a lot of post oaks here. They're fire resistant. A lot of trees, though, that are on south-facing slopes, that are big, mature trees, they have evolved for that site. They're more fire-resistant because fire was on that site, right?
Okay.
So a lot of those south-facing slopes have genetically, fire-resistant trees. But we don't want to torch those trees. We want to, most of the time, have a real easy, low intensity backing fire. And a backing fire is a fire that's either going against the wind or downhill, right? So it's going to move real slow. And that can be boring for some people. And some people get in trouble because they start backing it and they think, man, this is going too slow. Let's hurry this up. And then they get down a little low and they light a head fire, which is moving up the hill or with the wind.
Right.
And as we know, that fire can move. That you probably saw that firsthand in your backyard somewhere, right? But why that gets so intense is because a head fire can move and burn 16 times the intensity of a backing fire because it's preheating the fuel in front of it, right? So that fuel gets dry, that humidity drops, and it just starts jumping, and it gets real intense and hot real fast. And so most of the time in these hills, we're using backing fires. We're going real slow, and trying to protect the trees that we want to, that meet our mission. A lot of times those are, big oaks, big mature oaks. And then we may use a combination, right? So we could be backing and we may have this 20-yard strip of hardwood saplings, and we want to set those back because they're not doing anything for habitat or critters, right?
Okay, so you're going to go ahead and burn a really hot
we're gonna
fire
go
there.
down below and get a hotter fire through there to set those back. Try to kill, if we killed 50%, well, that's more sunlight to the ground, more native growth, and we might knock back that other 50% on the next fire, right? So we kind of look at it as, this is our paintbrush and the landscape's our canvas, and we kind of paint it as we go.
You're an artist.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's like.
This might be an ignorant question, but let's pretend you got a south-facing slope and you're trying to burn downhill / against the wind. How on earth do you do that?
One of them is probably going to dominate the other. Either the wind is going, once you get to a certain part of the slope, the wind's hitting coming off the, maybe a third of the way down, and just the way's hitting, it just lays down, right? And then also, if the conditions are right, we aren't burning that.
Okay.
We're really paying attention to those conditions.
Yeah.
And if it's not right, we're not gonna burn, or we'll burn another unit that it is favorable for.
So you can burn downhill. You just have to be with the wind.
You can, or even if it's against the wind, it's still going to back. And that a lot of times,
That's what you're
like
saying.
if it was
have
a
a good
glade,
line.
you have a really fine fuel load like grass or these cedars that are just going to really burn, and it'll carry.
Okay.
As long as you have enough fuel, right? Are there ever
Correct.
times where you're like, you guys having done some burning and taken fuel off the ground, do you ever find times where you're like, we're kind of running out of fuel here, we need to reignite again and drop the drip torch there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
And we're not going to we don't want to burn a unit if there's minimal fuel, because we don't want to remove that fuel and then it has to be 4 years before we can get another fire in there.
Yeah.
Right. If we can't carry, we're going to let that fuel build up enough that we can carry the next fire through.
That makes sense.
And going back kind of to that point too, we're not just going out and burning through the hardwoods and removing leaf litter. We're not doing anything. So I think sometimes a lot of people, the mistake they make, they hear prescribed fire and they want to go burn, and they go into the woods and they start burning. They may burn, 20 acres, and I think, man, we did some really good habitat work.
Good job.
All you did was remove leaf litter. Unless there's sunlight getting to the ground during the growing season, the summer, nothing's going to change under there.
That's where your timber stand improvement comes in.
Exactly. We got to kill some trees. I know everyone gets all shook up about killing trees.
Don't kill the trees, Daniel.
But we like to save the good trees, the big mature trees, the mass producing trees. We're killing the low quality trees, those mid-story trees, the trees that are unhealthy and just aren't ever going to do anything for critters, right? So we can get way more habitat and beneficial species at ground level for our wildlife than a tree's ever going to do.